This is I Came Running. Welcome back. Thank you for joining me. Hey, before we begin, if you've listened to all of these, I just want to thank you. This is something that I've never done before. This is something that I don't really know exactly what I'm doing. I wanted to keep them short and sweet. I didn't want them to drag on too long or anything like that, or just be a bunch of rambling. So I kind of went just straight to the point, and I hope you can appreciate that. But I just wanted to thank you, each and every one of you who have listened to these. So we'll get into this episode. So after I gave my life to Jesus, I kind of expected a before and after moment, like a dramatic shift or instant clarity, maybe a spiritual montage, and that didn't happen. Life stayed messy, grief stayed loud, but something underneath it all changed. My direction. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't running from God. I wasn't keeping him at arm's length. I wasn't avoiding the hard conversations anymore. I was moving toward him, with him. And that movement didn't look heroic. It looked ordinary. It looked small. It looked like learning how to live again, one decision at a time. When I gave my life to Christ, nothing magically got easier. Jasper was still gone. The house was still quiet in the ways that hurt the most. The grief didn't loosen up its grip just because I said yes to Jesus. But my heart started pointing somewhere new again. One of the first things that surprised me was my mouth. I was so worried, and I know that sounds random, but it really mattered to me. My language cleaned up really fast, like really fast. And that shocked me because I cussed like a sailor and I had no filter. And that was just part of who I was at that point in my life. I didn't make some big vow to stop. I didn't tape verses on the mirror or try to white knuckle it. One day I just realized it wasn't coming out of my mouth anymore. I remember thinking, okay, that's pretty weird, and the guys at work are thinking, okay, you're kind of talking like you're in third grade, fourth grade with your insults, if you want to call them that. But it wasn't like a prideful way of me realizing this, more like, all right, God, you're actually doing something here. And that was my first glimpse that this run toward Jesus was real. It's quiet, unimpressive, but real. I ran into forgiveness, and not the kind of forgiveness that pretends nothing ever happened, the kind that covers what you can't undo. Because here's something no one really talks about enough. The first time you mess up after giving your life to Jesus, it hits different. I remember slipping up and sinning not long after that moment at the altar. And immediately my brain went to, well, there it is. I knew it. I knew I wasn't for real this time. I expected condemnation. I expected distance. I expected God to pull back and say, well, see, this is why. I knew it. But that's not what happened. Grace met me instead. And not with excuses, not with permission to stay stuck, but with forgiveness that said, I'm not shocked by this. Let's just keep walking together. And that moment changed how I understood God. Forgiveness wasn't fragile. It wasn't hanging by a thread waiting for me to mess up again. It was steady, solid, and present. I ran into grace, not as a concept, not as a verse on the wall, grace as patience. Grace as God staying close even when my faith felt shaky. Grace as God not leaving when I didn't get it right. I started realizing God wasn't waiting for me to clean myself up. He was walking with me while I learned how to live again. And learning came with cost. Surrender didn't end the day I said yes to Jesus. It became daily and sometimes painful. One of the biggest costs was friendships. Some of our friends that we were friends with for years slowly just started to disappear. Not because some big argument, not because anyone announced anything, just distance, different priorities, different direction. And that hurt more than I expected. But at the same time, something else was happening. We were gaining new friends at church. People who didn't know the old version of us. People who were running in the same direction we were. It was loss and gain happening at the same time. Letting go of what's familiar to make room for what God is building. I ran into reverence. And not fear like I used to think about, more like awe. The closer I got to God, the bigger He became. Once I started maturing in my walk, reading Scripture as truth and not the way I did as a kid, something shifted. It stopped feeling like stories. It stopped feeling like make-believe. It became real. God was bigger than my grief, not in a way that dismissed my pain, in a way that could actually hold it. Reverence taught me that God is holy and somehow still near and close to us. And eventually, I ran into servitude. Not obligation and not pressure, but gratitude that had to move. Sharing our story about Jasper opened doors I didn't expect. People started telling us their stories, losses that sounded painfully familiar, grief they thought no one else understood. And suddenly, we weren't alone anymore. We were walking through it together. Helping others didn't erase our grief. It didn't fix anything, but it gave our pain purpose. And that mattered to us. I didn't serve to earn anything. I served because I had already been given everything. I came running into forgiveness, into grace, into surrender, into a life no longer centered on me. And the running didn't end. It still hasn't. Every day is another step toward Jesus. Some days are confident, some days limping, but always toward Him. If you've been listening and wondering if you've waited too long, if your story feels too messy, your faith too broken, your past too loud, grace still calls, forgiveness still wraps, and Jesus still receives people who come running. This podcast started with writing a song, but it continues as a life, one surrendered step at a time. This is I Came Running. Thanks for running with me.